Hello there, it's Antrice, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter podcast. This episode is sponsored by Trekell Art Supplies. For over 30 years, Trekell has been obsessed with the art of brush making, and now they're applying that same obsession to professional-grade artist panels. Both their brushes and panels are made right here in California at their Hesperia factory. Go to Trekell.com and use promo code SAVVY16 to get 15% off your next order. Chris Liberti is an observational painter originally from Buffalo, New York, who's forever engaged by the formal possibilities of painting. His paintings reflect his fascination with the deceptively simple interactions of color and shape. As Chris describes it, his paintings are recordings of sensations, of what he feels about the things that he sees. Objects included in his still lifes are often pieces of his life. His daughter's toys, for example, might inspire a painting. In this episode, Chris talks about painters who have influenced him, and he introduces me to Diebenkorn's 10 rules on painting. How have I missed this? At the time of this interview, Chris was getting ready for an exhibition at the John Natsoulis Gallery in Davis, California, which opens this week and runs through July 1st, 2017. So in this episode, we talk about his painting process, where his imagery comes from, and we get into the nitty-gritty details of getting ready for a show. So please enjoy this conversation with Chris Liberti. Chris, welcome to the Savvy Painter podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you, Antrice.
Can you talk a little bit about when you started out as a painter, sort of give us a backstory on when you decided that you were going to pursue art as a vocation?
Well, as a vocation, it took me a while to get there. It was something that I just wanted to do as just personal pleasure. I never wanted it to be like this thing where I had to rely on making paintings to make money. But then kind of over the years, I've been getting my work out there a little more, and I'm starting to see that that could be possible. And it's just to know that could be possible is nice because it allows me to work more. And that's really my end goal, is to just work as much as possible. So, out of college, I really just, I loved painting so much, but it was very consuming. And I never thought that it was even possible to make a living at it. So it just took some time, and maybe not until maybe 5 years ago that I started getting into galleries and selling the work more and seeing that this could be possible. So
was that sort of a gradual realization, or did you kind of have a moment where you realized that, or a moment or even an event where you realized that that might be more of a reality?
It wasn't really one event. It was a culmination of just selling a few paintings and then selling some more paintings and getting into more shows. So it kind of happened naturally. Yeah, there was no real one particular thing that happened. I just kind of saw this developing, and I got excited about it. And to think that I could, paint all the time would be great. Mm-hmm. I'm not there yet, but so yeah, there was no real one particular event, I guess.
You didn't get hit by lightning or anything like that?
No. And I didn't make a great painting or anything like that. So
yeah, the one where, like cars come to a screeching halt and people just start screaming your name.
Yeah.
I want to hear, so I've been seeing your work on Facebook for a while now. I don't remember when I started seeing it exactly, but I would love to hear your kind of, what is it that excites you about painting? Like, what is it that makes you want to go into your studio and paint, if that's not too vague of a question?
I mean, there's many things, but it's pretty simple for me. I mean, I'll go in the studio as often as I can, whether, I have an idea or not, and I'll just start working on something. But it's really a matter of just looking at my surroundings, everyday life objects, like my daughter's toys or my wife's clothes and things like that. And I just see these like shapes and colors, and that's enough to kind of get me started. And often I'll bring in, I'll just see the way something's set up on my daughter's nightstand or desk, and kind of reset that up in the studio and work from that. And there's things that you see on a daily basis that you might normally pass by, but if you stop to really look at them, they could be something interesting compositionally or color wise. And I think that's why I do a lot of, still lifes and just things around my house.
It's kind of, I don't want to say it's hard to tell from looking at it, but I feel like with your work, there seems to be a sort of equal kind of fascination with playing with color and with shapes. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the main things that kind of get me excited about working. Color and shape, really. I'm a big believer in just the essence of painting, which is putting down large shapes of color and not getting caught up in details, especially maybe for 90% of the painting. And then you almost don't want to get into the details and have this thing, call it finished. Mm-hmm. For me anyway. I like to keep things open as long as possible. And I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but
well, it does, because it's giving me some insight into your thought process and what it is that you're looking at. It reminds me a lot of something that right now I can't remember if it was Israel Hirschberg who said this or Anne Gale, because I heard it when I was studying with them, but both of them were there in Italy when I was studying with them. So, but the statement was, or the idea was, that painting is a question, and you have to continually be asking yourself, is this what I see? Is this what I see? Is this what I see? As opposed to just categorically saying, this is what I see. And so it seems like that coincides with what you're talking about. It sounds like you're almost sneaking up onto a finished painting and not wanting to overly commit too quickly.
Right. Yeah. And then you're saying, is this what I see? A lot of times it takes a lot longer to get to what you're really seeing.
Another thing I was really curious about with your work, if you don't mind, if I can take a peek into your studio.
Sure.
Are you doing sketches onto your canvas? Do you do little studies? Are you just going for it and blocking in color and working that way? Yeah,
it's more like blocking in color. I don't really do preliminary drawings or sketches. I do sketch, but it's rare, and it's just more like doodling. So yeah, I just kind of go right in, start playing around, and usually it ends up being like 3 different paintings before I'm somewhat happy with the last thing that I do. The canvas may turn 90 degrees or upside down. I usually take out things or add things until it's working, or it just not completely working, and then I'll see something else that makes sense to me, and there's a place for it in it. Somehow I'll find something that'll just work with what has happened, on the underpainting, whether or not, everything else under there shows or not.
So are you literally rotating the canvas on your easel while you're painting it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's so that you can, because interesting, while you're painting, so you're just giving it a quarter turn and looking at it in a different way?
Yeah.
And you continue painting?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not making this choice, to do it on every painting or anything. Mm-hmm. It's just the composition may not be working, and I'll just start turning it and then, just thinking about it and taking a picture of it and then staring at it for like 5 hours before I go to bed and trying to figure out where things need to go. And so there's that. I guess that's not really preliminary sketching or anything, but I do take photos of the stages and just kind of it keeps me up at night, which is kind of a bad thing. So I have to get up very early, but I tend to just kind of stare at them for a while until, I'll make a couple moves and a couple edits and then stare at it until I just want to move on from the thing, then there does become a point where I'm kind of tired of looking at it. And I just work on something new.
Do you tend to that makes a lot of sense. And it's always, I think, a relief to hear that other artists do that similar thing of you're just sitting there staring at it sometimes for hours before you make a move. Does that frustrate you when you're sitting there staring at the canvas for that long, or staring at your phone with the picture of it?
No, it doesn't frustrate me. It prepares me for the next working day. I like to kind of know what I'm going to do the next day, at least have a couple ideas. And usually it'll start with like maybe one or two things that I'm thinking about. And then those one or two things will just lead me into something completely different. So, but yeah, I don't mind looking at it. I lose sleep over it, but I enjoy looking at it and trying to figure it out. And
when you're losing sleep over it, are you like composing things in your mind and trying to figure it out, or are you just thinking like, what is wrong with that painting?
Maybe both. But I find that the more successful paintings are ones that you're excited about looking at through all the phases. The ones that you just don't want to look at, I think there's a reason.
Mm-hmm. Do you usually work on more than one painting at a time, or are you the type of person that you're going to like finish this one?
A little of both. It depends. Like sometimes I'll have maybe 3 or 4 going, but then maybe, 2 or 3 are picking up quicker, and then I'll have one left, and then I'll be done with that one. And then I have nothing behind me. So I kind of have to start the rotation over again. So it really varies. I mean, I'll have stuff sitting around and I'll play around with it, but for the most part, maybe 1 to like 4 paintings.
Mm-hmm. Have you done any paintings that for you, for whatever reason, you felt particularly proud of, or you felt were like, I'm thinking, sometimes you just have that feeling like I really learned something in this one, or I really achieved a thing that I have been trying to achieve. And I feel like I've kind of hit at least one little milestone, no matter how small it is.
I mean, there's no really one or a couple. I'm trying to, get better at each one, and I want the next one to be better than the last one. So it's more like, you want your next painting to be your best painting, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some paintings, sure, I think back to where I'm like, oh, maybe I should have kept that one. I liked it, or it reminded me of something.
So the ones that you were thinking, the ones that you felt like you kind of looking back, you wish you had kept one, what were those like? Can you describe them?
I think there was one, I don't know if I sent you this. It was a basement sink one. It was a utility sink, but it was like bluish, grayish. I did it about a year ago, and it's from my parents' basement. And it was something that I've kind of always painted since college, just because I set up in the basement when I was living there during college. And, every so often when I'd come home to visit, I would paint it again. And that was just one that I thought was one of the better ones, just for the reason of it being kind of, my parents' house. And
yeah,
I spent a lot of time down there, and,
it had some kind of nostalgia for you.
Yeah, I guess so. And the utility sink is really kind of like one of the most basic things too, which I like. And it just has a nice design to it.
Who are some of the artists that you were looking at when you were learning how to paint?
Richard Diebenkorn, of course, Frank Auerbach. And then I was really interested in Impressionist painting during college. I thought that was kind of what painting really kind of is about, these spots of color next to each other, making, light and shadow and shapes happen by these like blobs of color. And I really was kind of excited about that. So for me, that's kind of like the basis of all painting, for me anyway.
Is seeing color next to color?
Yeah. I mean, looking at Monet and Van Gogh and Cézanne, I don't know, I feel like that's when paint was doing what it was meant to do, kind of. I mean, there's so many great painters before that and after it, but that was really like, I thought was the beginning of just these like notes of color, kind of abstract looking, but still something was happening. It was, these colors were just showing light and shadow.
And are you like, when your painting so it has like all these super, in some regards, it has a super strong, most of them at least have these super strong pieces of color. And it feels like there is a lot of layering that you have going on there. When you're painting, are you like painting and then scraping it down and then painting again? Or what's your process when you're actually in there?
Yeah, there's definitely layers, just because, like I said before, I'm really just shifting the composition around or, turning the canvas. just trying to figure out, where things are going to fall into place. So there's a lot of just playing around, and I enjoy that. I just enjoy like working kind of more abstractly and just, reworking things. Yeah. And like you said, like scraping things down, using glazes, using more impasto, thicker areas. So yeah. And I think that a lot of it comes from, I used to paint houses when I was younger during college, and we used to paint a lot of these old Victorian houses in Buffalo, and scraping down the woodwork, you'd see just like 100 years layers of paint.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so interesting looking. And then I loved the feel of the paint from the new paint going over that scraped surface. I didn't love covering it up completely. I mean, we had to, otherwise we would get fired. But I just enjoyed that feel, and I think that's kind of where it's stuck with me. Because I've asked myself that, like, why, where is this coming from? Why is this interesting to me? So.
Yeah, I really get that sense when it actually does remind me that my brother painted houses also, and so like. I was around it somewhat growing up because he's significantly older than I am. But yeah, that whole like that history that is underneath when you sand down to, kind of get all the old paint off or the loose paint off. And so you're building up, I guess, like I'm just kind of curious because looking at your paintings, like I'm always thinking like how many layers are on there? And, it's hard to tell that's the only thing that the wonderful thing and the thing that kind of sucks about the internet is you can see so many people's art, but you don't really get to see it because it's, it's a digital version of it. But when you're creating those layers, it feels like you're doing them somewhat impressionistically in the sense that you're consciously putting colors over each other and scraping and allowing them to show through. Is that intentional, or is that just happy accidents all over the place?
It's definitely both. I mean, the happy accidents, that's where I think most paintings are successful, is where a good portion of it is kind of like, how did you do that?
Right.
Or even asking yourself, like, you don't even know how you did it,
You kind of wake up and you're like, whoa, who did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a little of both, but I feel like I just need that. Whether it's intentional, it is intentional, I guess, but it's not like I'm saying, I need this to be textured. It's just kind of how I work, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like the paint just works a lot better when there's more layers. The color is just richer, denser.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as dry looking. So I feel like that all has to work together, along with everything else, composition, and to make the painting work, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting because somebody was asking a question about paint mediums and what people are using. And I'm reading through all of these answers. There's probably like 30 answers of people very descriptively talking about what types of medium they use and why they use it. And I never really, I think as painters, sometimes we have these habits that just are, that they weren't really you didn't like, sometimes we don't actually set out to do something. It's just either by necessity or what you happen to, I don't know, like there was no conscious choice in it. And I realized in that conversation that when I'm, especially when I'm working for myself, when I'm working in the studio, I don't use any medium at all, like nothing.
Okay.
And, it's straight out of the tube, but I'm scraping it and beating just beating it up really. Cause, like for studio paintings, I take forever to do them. So it gets this kind of weird, I don't know. It is kind of like that where you get all these bizarre textures and stuff that there's no way you could have planned for it, but the paint has, it's kind of unadulterated paint. It's just doing what paint does. And there's nothing in there that's imposing on it. And it's interesting because I was trying to think like nobody actually taught me to do that. And I was trying to think, before we started this conversation, I mentioned I was just being really cheap with my domain name and I should have bought it for however long they offered it to me.
And so I was trying to remember, like, was it because when I was in art school, I was too cheap to buy mediums? Like I was like the starving art student. And I was like, I don't know what all that stuff is. I don't want to use it. And it stinks.
Yeah. Well, some of them extend the life of your paints, but yeah, they'll make them go a little further, I guess. But yeah, I think you want to, like you're saying, I think you want to have the paint do a lot of the work for you. When you start really, it's tricky. Like you start trying to maybe, fool the paint or whatever, for lack of a better term. But I think you just have to really work with it and let it kind of guide you almost.
Mm-hmm.
As far as mediums go, like I use liquid oleo pasto or liquid impasto and liquid regular just for the speed of drying. Because I do paint a lot with more paint. It would just take too long to dry, and I wouldn't be able to kind of work on it the next day, or
What size are these, just out of curiosity?
I mean, the largest I'm going right now is really like maybe 40 inches, anywhere from like 12 or even smaller sometimes. But right now I'm kind of working within like 20s, 30s, 20 inches, 30 inches range. And I'm enjoying it. And I think I was working small a lot more just because of kind of time constraints. And it was just good practice for me too. But now that I'm working larger, it's definitely, I'm much more happier with the larger surface and, working with larger brushes and tools. So.
Yeah, you can have more fun with it.
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of like the difference between like, being in a tiny little car and trying to like move around in it versus you can kind of stretch out.
Yeah. And you're kind of still working. I was thinking that it's not really a time issue. It's a little bit of a time issue, but you're still working out the same problems, and it's just as hard working out a problem in a small canvas than it is on a large canvas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to me, it seems like you kind of spend an equal amount of time on it, it feels like, to solve the same problems.
Yeah.
And especially if you're playing with layering texture, you can really take a large area that is almost the same color and get a lot of really exciting things happening in there with the texture and, stuff showing up underneath.
Yeah, absolutely.
This episode is sponsored by Trekell Art Supplies. For over 30 years, Trekell has been obsessed with the art of brush making. Trekell sells directly to artists, and they do that so they can keep their quality high and their costs low. Both their brushes and panels are made right here in California at their Hesperia factory. Brian Trekell is the founder of Trekell Art Supplies. I asked him what he recommends artists do to keep their brushes longer.
Well, probably one of the most funny things is when people find out I'm a brush maker, they'll pull up some Grumbacher brush that they've had for 30 years, and it's worn down to a nub, and they say this is the greatest thing they have, and they're still using it. I always get a kick out of that. But if you want to make a brush last, you've got to take care of it, and that means you got to clean it. And quite often, that's where people have trouble, is that they just don't clean it well enough. And it builds up and it destroys the filament, so it makes it bush out and it just makes it work improperly. If they want them to last forever and ever and ever, take really good care of them. But depending on what you're painting on, it's going to wear out the brush. That's another thing, is that people need to be able to recognize that the brush has its useful life and it's time to get another one. You're going to notice at some point in time that it's just not giving you the result you think you should be getting out of it.
Go to Trekell.com and use promo code SAVVY16 to get 15% off your next order.
What are you working on now? What are the things in your studio that are keeping you up at night, Chris?
I'm shipping paintings to a show in Davis, California. So I'm like packing, and it takes forever. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. I'm just boxing up a bunch of stuff. No, in between that, I'm really trying to figure out like this still life setup here. I bought some new like tables to kind of elevate things, and platforms and things like that. So I'm just it's a lot less painting right now. I wish it was more, but I also have a part-time job too, and I have two girls that are 6 and 5 right now, so my schedule's pretty tight. It's good though. I mean, so yeah, right now I'm just Yeah, I'm working on a couple things, but it's more about what I'm going to be doing next. I'm really into setting up these kind of intricate still lifes with just a lot of like playful things that I'm finding around the house and outside. And
I'm sure your daughters help with that.
yeah, they do. And they love to come in the studio, and I want to encourage that. And we try to paint together, and they really enjoy it. So yeah.
I'm asking this because I think it would be very different, but what advice do you give to a 5 or a 6-year-old, or what do you not tell them?
I just want them to have fun at this point. And I'll show them some examples. I'll just say like this vase or whatever is white, but it's not really just all white. There's other colors in it. Just simple things like that. They're 5 and 6, and they have fun, and I'm glad they do. They'll see me doing it, and they'll come in like, can I paint? And most of the time it's okay. But sometimes you're like in the middle of something where you just kind of need quiet in the studio. But for the most part, it's good. So
I remember talking to, I'm going to say it was Cameron Schmidt, but just this, like, there's the ideal of being an artist and being able to invite your kids into the studio with you. And then there's the reality of it. And I think she was talking about it. I mean, they were much younger. So like 2 and 3 and stuff. And she was thinking like, we could all be painting together. And sometimes you can.
Yeah, sometimes you can. And other times it's like, yeah, no.
But that's got to be creating just these incredible memories for them.
Yeah. And I want them to do it. I don't want to discourage it.
Mm-hmm. So when you mentioned Davis, is that the John Natsoulas gallery?
Yeah. I have a show on May 19th there.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Yeah. So things have to go out within the next couple days here.
Now.
So, yeah. I'm almost done. Oh my gosh. It takes forever to pack these things.
I know. That's like the interesting thing is like most people assume that the work is all, the painting and stuff. And then there's all this other stuff that sometimes we think will take, I don't know, a day. And then you realize like, no, that's actually a week to pack it all up and get it all like ship shape and send it all out.
Photos and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting your stuff shot?
Yeah, I do it. I do it in my studio. It's just easier.
So can I ask, I don't often catch somebody right when they're preparing to a show. So would you mind getting into the nitty gritty of what you do to get ready to send your stuff off for a show? All the boring stuff that you don't want to do?
Well, I guess make sure everything's signed, right? And then I like to label the backs too with the titles and the size and the medium and the year. And I take photos of everything in my studio. I just have 2 like tungsten lights on stands, and I just kind of figure out the best position for each painting and set up the tripod. Yeah, and I just take photos of everything and edit it in Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
And I make low res JPEGs and then high res TIFFs or JPEGs, save them all in a folder, and then they go out to wherever the show is, and I can use them for my website as well. They can use them for web or print.
Mm-hmm.
And is this what you're looking for?
Yeah, seriously. Okay. I know it's like, I've done this before and everybody's like, oh my God, that's so helpful. I didn't know that you did, or I never thought about that. Or, like there's these little details. Like I have a feeling people will comment on labeling the back of it with the size and everything, but those kind of things just make it so much easier for the gallery, right?
Yeah, it's nice. They can just, it's all right. All the information's right there. They don't have to, email me or anything and then, with the boxes, it's just great. I order like wood panels that I paint on from a company in Philadelphia, and they send them packed very well. So I save all the boxes and I just reuse them. And that's pretty much it.
Did you curate your own show, or did John help you with that?
I sent him like 30 or 35 images to choose from. He picked about, 20 or 25 out of them. I think there's 20. I love the studio stuff too, because I have a couple like, Inside the Art of Studio books. Just trying to figure out like how to set up the studio is kind of, it's nice to see how other people work. You're so isolated as a painter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really curious about your still life setup. Did you find that things weren't working and you wanted to revise it, or were you getting kind of feeling like you were doing the same thing over and wanted to switch it up a little bit? Or what kind of inspired you to redo your still life setup?
everything was painted kind of on the same level.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to, right now, I mean, I just have different levels now that I can play with, whether it's like, eye level or a little higher, or, just kind of adjusting the view plane.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that's been changed, lately.
Just by changing the view plane and bringing in something to stack things on.
Yeah, I have like tables stacked on tables, or I'm, painting on, there's like a mantle in here, and I have like, a board kind of attached to that, where before it was like everything was kind of table level, looking down at it.
Right. And do you build like walls for it also, or is it just plain flat surface?
Yeah, I'll put paintings as walls behind it for different colors behind there, behind the still life. And a lot of times I'll use like my kids' drawings and put them up behind there.
I bet they love that.
So anything, I'm just trying to get a little bit more like, I don't know, playful, I guess. Lack of a better word, but I'm just having more fun with that. I want to have fun with it. I don't want it to be super, because it's very consuming, right?
Yes.
Painting.
Yes.
So I want it to be, like the Diebenkorn quote, thinking of Pollyanna, right? So I think what he meant by that was about some sort of happiness in a painting.
I don't know that quote.
It's in that 10 rules, Diebenkorn's 10 ruals. I mean, that's what I took from it, but
yeah,
I could be.
It's fun. It's so much more fun when artists are using like contemporary things that actually are in their house for still lifes and not trying to recreate still lifes from Rembrandt age, like,
right. Yeah.
Like trying to throw a dead rabbit in there or whatever.
Yeah.
Keep thinking about Pollyanna. Okay, I just found it.
It's a good 10 rules list to have around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like all those things, like, not just that list, but all those things always fly around in my head as I'm painting, just little quotes that people say or things that I've picked up in books. And, I guess they're there when I need them.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because we all, like, gosh, really, since I started doing this podcast, I have even more voices in my head, but which makes me sound like a crazy person. But but it's true. You can kind of, I don't feel like they're like, the crazy person voices, or that I have like all these contradictions in my head. It just feels like, in a sense, when I'm thinking about trying something or I'm stuck on something, the answer will come that way. That, I'm reading this and it's making me laugh, but I'm, one of the 10th rule in the Diebenkorn, at least the one I'm looking at, says, be careful only in a perverse way.
Yeah.
And
right.
And I'm like, that's really fun to think about.
Yeah, exactly. You can really make it your own, I mean, what does that really mean?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think these things, and it helps me at least. I don't know if it's the same for you, but to have these, to be able to recall these things when I need a different perspective. Because like you said, we're in our studio, often alone. And so there's voices in your head that make you crazy, or there's voices in your head that are sort of these like little angels that come out and point you and kind of spin you around and make you a little dizzy and say, now look again.
Sure. Yeah. It's good to have those. I mean,
and I love it that artists are the only ones that can, we can talk about the voices in our head and it seems totally normal.
Yeah. It's just when you start talking back to yourself, I guess, well, that happens to you sometimes.
Yeah. So who are some of the art, you've mentioned Diebenkorn, and you said that when you were starting out painting, you were looking at Diebenkorn and some of the impressionists for their ability to use color. Now, after you have more experience, do you find that those artists that you looked at when you were starting out are still sort of guiding you, or have you moved on to other artists?
I mean, yeah, I've definitely discovered a lot more. I mean, like Matisse is big for me. Antonio Lopez Garcia.
What is it about Matisse?
Matisse, I mean, he had a great sense for composition and just capturing the essence of things. And I like the bright colors, just the simplicity that it looks simple, but it's really not.
Mm-hmm. Simple is hard.
Yeah.
Simple is really hard.
And I mean, contemporary painters, Antonio Lopez Garcia, my old professor, Jim Fallon, I love his stuff. Alex Kanevsky's one of my favorites. Sangram Majumdar, I think is his name.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce. He's in San Francisco, right? Or was, at least.
I'm not sure.
He does these really... He seems to be able to take chaos and present it in a really interesting way. The paintings that I'm thinking of are... I want to... And I haven't looked at his work in a really long time, so this is interesting going back to my total memory. But I feel like it was either construction sites or dilapidated buildings, but really complex, but he was able to do something really interesting with it. And he uses a lot of layering and color too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. No, that's what is his name? His stuff is interesting too, though. No, he does a lot of like architectural stuff you're talking about, like geometric kind of. Yeah, I know who that. Yeah, I like his work too. I can't remember his name.
I'm gonna have to look it up now. I'm gonna have to track that one down because I remember this is long before I even thought about starting the podcast. I remember looking at that person's work and thinking like, wow. But I know who you're talking about. I guess I'm just not. Images aren't coming to my mind.
He had maybe one of the more popular ones. He has like a couple paintings of like an orange extension cord kind of coiled up, like spaghetti on a floor. I can send you his link. And Ken Cooley's one of my favorites. Catherine Kehoe. So yeah, there's a lot of great painters out there. I'm not the best with art history knowledge,
right?
But I enjoy going to museums. I definitely, I enjoy all that. But as far as holding names in my head and names of paintings and all that, it's just never been my thing, I guess.
Yeah, I think I definitely have like that sort of recency bias. If I, in that case, that was somebody I was looking at. God, it was probably 10 years ago, or maybe a little less, but a while ago. You may have sort of answered this already, but I'm kind of curious if you're able to articulate what it is you're searching for when you're painting.
That's a tough question.
Chris, what's the meaning of life?
Yeah. Well, I know meditation and yoga help, so that's been helping me with my painting. I mean, I'm really just trying to find that. I feel like when a painting looks good enough to eat, it's pretty good. It's really just about color and shape, composition. I mean, it's how to make this whole thing work. When
you refer back to shape and color, it's, again, that thing of sounds so simple, right?
Yeah.
But simple is so hard.
Yeah, and I think that's like the basics of it. And that's why I go back to, there's a book that I often go back to called Hawthorne on Painting. I don't know if you know it. Mm-hmm. But it's just over and over. He's just drilling in your head, like, this has to be spots of color, notes of color. This, don't think of it as a person's head. Just think of it as, two colors. So that's something I just keep in my mind as I'm going a lot of the time. And I want that to translate. I just want the colors to kind of work and do their thing, with shape and. Yeah,
well, and that's a lot. It sounds so deceptively easy if you just say that you're interested in painting colors, or painting shapes, and then combining them is infinitely more challenging. It could keep me at least occupied for about 20 or 30 years. Speaking for myself.
It's endless. I mean, it's pretty,
Yeah.
That's what's, captivating about it. There's so many ways to do it and so many options. So. Yeah.
And if you just look at, some of the artists that you mentioned, like Ken Cooley or Catherine Kehoe, and both of them do this thing that makes, they're breaking things down into geometric. I'm thinking of Catherine Kehoe and some of her portraits and how her self-portraits and how she breaks down the planes of the face. And it's almost like, those exercises that at least I had to do in art school, where you're making, straight planes, as many straight planes as you can, rather than trying to make everything soft and fuzzy. And it is so, you look at one of her paintings and think, that's so easy.
Right. Yeah.
and then you try it one time.
Yeah, they're pretty stunning. I mean, it takes a lot of practice, right?
Yeah, and then back to the Hawthorne book, that idea of just notes of color, one right next to each other. And I don't remember how he phrased it, but the way that that idea of not naming things. And
yeah, right.
Like sometimes when I feel like I need that reminder, somebody one time said, just don't ever paint a noun. So I had "don't paint nouns" written above my easel for a while, and people would come in and be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And it's like, it's a different way. Like, it's like, again, it's those perspectives, like just shifting things, the facet just slightly of the glass that you're looking through. So whether you say don't name things or don't paint nouns, it kind of tweaks it just enough for me that I can see it again, that I can that it's new again,
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. You just want to see the colors and not really worry about the content of it. It's not that easy to do. There's the tendency to want to kind of make this thing perfect or make it look like what it is. And a lot of times it's easier done by just, a couple strokes rather than just, trying to model this thing into something.
Mm-hmm. Something tangible or something like a book, as opposed to that flat plane that happens to be a book.
Right.
So your show opens May 19th at John Natsulis Gallery and runs, when does it run till?
Till July 7th.
Okay. I'm already calculating if I can make it up to Davis or not.
Yeah, how far are you from there?
I'm from Davis. It's probably maybe a 6-hour drive.
Well, I'm fascinated with California. I lived out there for a year.
Where did you go to school in Philadelphia, or where did you go to school?
Buffalo State.
Buffalo State. Okay. I was thinking that, I feel like there is a lot of those artists that you mentioned are Philadelphia based. And I feel like there's this.
Oh yeah. It's a hotbed there. I mean,
yeah, it's almost, I can't say that there's a look to Philadelphia based painters, but almost.
Yeah. And PAFA has a lot to do with that too.
Yeah.
It's a great art school, but yeah, I mean, I was there a few months ago. I did a class with Alex Konevsky. It was just like a weekend thing. And there was just so much to see. I stayed there for like 5 days and just kind of went around to some of the museums and the galleries. And it's really a great art town. I can't believe I haven't spent much time there. Living in New York for a while, I was spoiled, but yeah, Philadelphia is great.
Yeah, it's like every time I see an artist and I'm like, oh, wow, there's a connection to PAFA.
Yeah.
It's really interesting and great for PAFA, I guess.
Sure.
Very cool. Well, Chris, thank you so much for chatting with me about your art and putting up with my questions about how exactly do you pack that?
My pleasure. Thank you. It was great.
I don't know if that was what you're expecting. I just kind of got the sense that maybe I shouldn't try to dig too deep into the hows and the whys.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's a big part of my life. I mean, it actually, with kids, it's tricky with the schedules, but I feel like I've been producing better work just because my time is limited. So when I'm in the studio, I'm pretty productive.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting. Like, if there's one thing I've learned, I think, from doing this podcast, is a lot of people have this fear that when they have kids that they're not going to be able to paint anymore. And almost 100% of painters who are parents have said that exact same thing, that it has made them in some ways a better painter because they have this limitation on time that they didn't have before.
Yeah, totally.
And they're hyper-focused when they're in the studio, much more productive and getting more interesting work done. And you didn't say this, but I think kids are sort of a natural visual clock in a sense, they grow so fast. And so you can see time passing and you're aware of it. And I think it gives painters a sense of urgency.
That has definitely 100% seeped its way into my work. It's become more about time passing as far as content goes. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's just interesting to see how fast it's going and how to record it and kind of, encapsulate it, I guess, in a painting and be able to look back at that time. It may not be them, but it's kind of everything around us.
Do you have that? Sorry, I know I just said thanks for being on the show and bye, but I'm going to ask you more questions now.
Sorry.
That's okay. I do this. You can, tell me to shut up anytime you want. But do you have that thing where, like, for example, I can hear a song and I remember exactly where I was. Not every, there are certain times and it's random and it's never anything really significant. But I remember, for example, that I was at that particular intersection and there was a guy crossing the street wearing X, Y, and Z. And I had, and the temperature of the car and everything when I heard that song. And I have that with some of my a lot of my paintings too. That I remember precisely what was going on in my life, the music I was listening to, everything that was going on while I was painting that painting.
Yeah, and not even just like that at that time, but maybe like a whole kind of week, before and after or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That must be so with the paintings that you're doing and with that kid, I'm imagining that's amplified.
Yeah, I think so. But right now it's, I haven't really had a chance to look back that far on it yet. Maybe in a couple of years I will. But I'm assuming that's, what will happen. I hope anyway.
It's really funny. Yeah, I just saw a painting of mine at a collector's house and I was looking at it and I was remembering just how hot it was when I was painting and I didn't have air conditioning and things like that. We're just like immediately looked at it and was like, yeah, I was really focused because I was trying not to think about how hot it was.
Yeah. Thanks for buying it so I could buy an air conditioner.
Yes. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for indulging me.
Thank you, Antrice. It was fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Savvy Painter podcast with Chris Liberti. If you are in Northern California, stop by to see his show at the John Natsoulis Gallery in Davis. Once again, that runs from this week, I believe it opens today, until July 1st. Otherwise, if you're not in Northern California, go to savvypainter.com and click on the podcast tab to see examples of Chris's paintings. Plus, you'll get links to all of the other artists that we talked about and Demoncorn's 10 rules on painting. As I mentioned last week, today, May 18th, is my birthday. In fact, this is kind of a birthday bonanza week. My mom turned 82 on Tuesday. My husband turns the big 40 on Saturday, and two very close friends also celebrate their birthdays this weekend. So I am looking forward to a poolside barbecue somewhere sunny this weekend. So here's what I'd like for my birthday. I would love to hear from you. If this podcast has helped you out or made you feel less alone while you're painting away in the studio, if you've learned something or had an aha moment, go to savvypainter.com/support and share your story there. When you get there, you will also see a PayPal link. So I need to tell you that this podcast is always going to be free. So if you are struggling, there will never be a charge for it. And I don't want you to feel obligated. But if you can contribute even just a little bit, no matter what it is, it really, really helps. The Savvy Painter podcast is made possible in large part by listeners like you. So I know that sounds very NPR, PBS, or whatever it is. Sounds very much like a pledge drive because it is. Go to savvypainter.com/support to help contribute to this podcast. This is definitely my own version of one of those pledge drives. So if you'd like to help out, it's quick, it's easy, and it is a massive help to the show. So once again, this is savvypainter.com/support. I started this drive last week, and I have to tell you, I am so honored and humbled by your response. With painting, I think it's really easy just to put your head down and work, and you forget sometimes to come up for air, to look around and see where you've been and how far you've come. It's amazingly easy to get tunnel vision and to think that you're on this journey alone. And that's probably the most common comment I get from artists about this podcast, that it gives a sense of community and solidarity. And this past week, you guys have made me realize that I was sort of slipping into that spiral with this podcast. So all of you who reached out last week to tell me why you listen to this podcast, to share your stories, and to contribute to keep this thing going, thank you. I have so much gratitude. I'm not even sure how to tell you how much it means to me, but thank you so very much. I am very humbled and honored to be able to be part of your studio time. One more thing I want to let you know. This year, you can expect a lot more workshops from Savvy Painter. If you are an artist who struggles with getting painting time in or feels like you're always busy but never really moving forward with your art, then my workshops just might interest you. Past workshops include Mindset Mastery, a 5-week online workshop to help you get past the roadblocks that keep you from painting. In it, we tackle the inner critic, fears of artists, and setting yourself up for a successful creative day. The workshop, How to Develop a Relationship with the Right Gallery, helped several artists find the right gallery and show their work. So if this is something that interests you, you can go to savvypainter.com/workshop and get on the email list. This is separate from the main list that tells you when a new episode comes out. This is just for the workshop, so you don't get quite as many emails, but when you do, there's always something really good happening. Sign up now and get a downloadable PDF with case studies that tell you exactly how 3 artists pushed through barriers that were getting in the way of their studio time. You can, for example, learn how Rhonda went from not wanting to call herself an artist to getting her very first solo show. Also, listen to an introverted artist describe how she built her confidence and then spoke in front of an audience of her peers. And you can discover the tools that Samantha used to take back her power after a decade of believing that she had no, I'm putting air quotes there, she had no talent. So again, go to savvypainter.com/workshop to reserve your place on the list. When you sign up, you get that downloadable case studies that I mentioned, but more importantly, you get exclusive invites to upcoming workshops. Most of the time when I launch a new program, it sells out before I ever announce it publicly. So reserve your spot now at savvypainter.com/workshop. Until next week, this is Antrice Wood with the Savvy Painter podcast. Thank you so much for listening.